Okay, good morning, everybody. Hope everybody is well. Happy Monday. We're marching into the month of March. I didn't even mean that pun, by the way. That just popped out. But I love March. I love March for so many reasons, and I'll explain some of them to you. Because growing up, there's something called March Madness, if you know what that is, and that was a huge part of my life as a young man. March Madness. But more than that is that March is a threshold, right? Thresholds are powerful places. Whenever you're doing something in life, you have to always look for the threshold. If you notice in a house, there's a Jewish rule that when you walk into a home, you put a mezuzah. A mezuzah is a parchment with certain parts of the Torah in it. You put it on the threshold because thresholds are critical places in the house, right? If you just picture, if you look at your home, if you look at your house or apartment or wherever it is, the place in your house that could be the most significant place is the threshold, because that is the border between the outside world and the inside world. And so that border is critical. Do you bring the outside world into the inside world? Do you bring the inside world into the outside world? How do you navigate these two worlds? How do you navigate these two borders? How do you navigate two different parts of your life, outside and inside? Well, that moment of navigation, if you will, takes place in the threshold, which is why it's at that moment that, or one of the reasons maybe, that we put a piece of the Torah symbolizing God's presence to remind us you're walking into a place, you're coming out of a place. Thresholds are critical. They signify opportunity and potential for change. I have a friend of mine who, what he does, he's basically a startup CEO. It's a pretty cool job. He started, I don't know when he started this, but what he does is young companies, when they start to grow, they need someone to run the place. Each company stage is different. So at some point when you're too small, it don't matter. When you're already very big, you need a different type of person. But when you just first start out and you're growing and you're trying to gain momentum and you're trying to build the company, in that sort of post-startup phase, as you transition from VC to different series of funding, once you get, or really probably from angel to VC, let's say. So that's what he does. And so he jumps into these companies and he starts to make changes, and etc. So he always tells me, he says, the amount of capital that I have to get stuff done in the first 90 days that I'm there is so much greater than right after that. It's a threshold. He's new. And when you're new, people listen. There's a period of time to get everything in, to start making changes, because if you miss that window, it's much harder later. You're already part of the company, right? When you start a new year, when you start a new relationship, the honeymoon phase, these are thresholds. And then the back end thresholds, when you're about to leave, when you retire. There's a whole nother bit of new energy that gets created when you're walking out the door. Thresholds, they're critical. And the reason why they're critical is because they create their own momentum. They create their own excitement. So if you capitalize on it, you're capitalizing on energy that you may not have had a month ago, or a week ago, whatever the threshold is. But if you know your thresholds, you know where your thresholds are, and you own your threshold, you can really make major changes in your life. The famous story about one of the great rabbis, his name is Rabbi Elyashiv, He was a rabbi in Jerusalem. And I think I told this here, where he would stop at the threshold of his door every night and fix himself. You could picture an older sage, if you can just picture it, right? Wearing, probably a long black coat and a white shirt and a hat and a long white beard. Can you imagine? Can you picture it? Stopping at his threshold of his apartment every day to fix himself, so that when he walked in to see his wife of, 50 years, she saw the best version, if you will, the best presented version. And one time he was with a student, and the student goes, "What are you doing?" And he said, "My wife, I did this for my wife on our date. I shouldn't do this for my wife now that she's married to me 50 years. So, yeah, you have to be a certain level of human being to be able to appreciate what you have, but you also have to know how to own the threshold. He created a habit around his threshold, probably when he was very young, that every time you hit the threshold to your door, take a breath. You're walking in to see your wife. How did you walk in when it was the first date? Do you think it should get less valuable over time or more valuable over time when you get to see her? You don't do that in the hallway. You don't do that in the kitchen. You do it at the threshold. You're about to leave your day. You're about to leave your house. You're about to go out into the world. You stop at the threshold. You give a kiss if you have a mezuzah. If you don't have a mezuzah and you want a mezuzah, email me and we'll get you a mezuzah. There should be nobody that wants a mezuzah that shouldn't have a mezuzah. I know people that have buildings, malls, every single threshold has a mezuzah. Little extra godliness always goes in the right direction. I'm telling you right now, charlie@charlieharari.com. You want a mezuzah, you email me. With God's help, Blinada will get you a mezuzah. But the custom is when you stop, you kiss that mezuzah, you pause. You don't just run through thresholds. You don't just run through your life. You pause at your threshold. You're going somewhere. It may seem subtle. Your life's not subtle. Our time in this world isn't subtle. I spent time with my rabbi recently as he's explaining to me that when you're involved in a negotiation, you have to be super clear to make sure that everybody knows who you're representing. He's like, this isn't a subtle thing. People's perception matters. You can't come across one way. Clarity. Being able to navigate the subtle things in life is where the greatness happens. Remember the story of Elon Musk. Elon Musk, when they first made Tesla, Elon Musk, the engineers basically said that it was a bad decision to put those. I don't know if anyone's ever seen a Tesla, but when you come to the car, the handle opens up, comes at you. Right? That doesn't do anything with the car, right? That's just a cool concept. If the handle was baked into the door, it would drive the same. His engineers explained to him that it was an unnecessary cost and a waste of time, and it just didn't make sense financially to put the handle on. And he's like, no, we're doing the handle. Like, why? Like, because this detail. Just think about the ingenuity here of a great entrepreneur. What's the car door? What's the car door? It's a threshold. That's what it is. It's a threshold. It's the threshold between you standing outside and you driving. The threshold to your car is the car door. What's the experience, the threshold? I don't know if he used this language, but that's what he was getting at. What's the experience of my user at the threshold? Because my user will remember the threshold. Because if the experience when I walk to my car is that the thing just pulls out like some cool futuristic machine, I'm going to have in my brain at the threshold, this is awesome. That feeling is going to shift the experience when I sit down in my car. It's going to change my perception of what I have. Now I have to follow through. It's like if you're going to sit down and it's not going to work, but if you don't have that, you miss the opportunity of shifting something. We have thresholds all the time. I had a friend of mine who was a principal at a school, and they brought him in. to help blow the school up in a good way. What's the first thing he did? What's the first thing he did besides teacher meetings? You know what the first thing he did was? He went outside to the carpool line every morning. A lot of teachers, a lot of principals do this now. They go outside every morning and they greet all the kids. They greet everyone. These principals have a lot to do. It's a busy job. You think principals of big schools have time to say good morning to every little kid? There's a principal in our school here. Massive school, massive boys' school. It's incredible. Multiple principals I've seen. I believe the principal in my kid's school. Like, when you pull up, you know, you see, you're there. Good morning. Why? Because the kid's threshold. It's the kid's threshold. It's his first thing he does when he walks into the threshold of that school. He sees a principal saying good morning to him. You know how the kid feels? You know what it does to his day? It's a threshold. Thresholds are critical. And they matter in life. March is a threshold. That's why I love March. It's a threshold into spring. It's a threshold into a season that starts to bring us back out into the world. Winter is the time to hibernate, to work on ourselves internally, to think, to contemplate, to close in. It's a healthy thing in life to have alone time, to have thinking time, to have time of contemplation. Summer is the time of expansion, of getting out, of trying new stuff. The threshold from winter to summer is spring. It's the beginning. The flowers are blooming. The weather is turning, depending on where you live. It's an important time. It's an important time for us to start to take things on, to do some stuff, to start to live with the meaning that we've been talking about, which we'll get into again, hopefully this week. All right, everybody. Have a great day. Do me a favor, think about the thresholds in your life. Maybe we'll talk about this again a little bit tomorrow. Think about the thresholds in your life, what you can do to make them greater. And you'll see that they'll build momentum so that whenever you're in the next thing, you'll have greater energy to work with. All right, we'll talk about this. Okay, everybody, have a great day. With God's help, I cannot wait. See you again tomorrow. Have a great day.
Living on a lifeline, the world doesn't ever seem to change. Looking for the sunshine, but you're caught up in the rain. It's like your eyes are wide open, but you cannot see. You're watching life pass you by like 1, 2, 3. Walking in destruction, the winds of life blur your vision. All the devastation forever feels like you're on the run. It's time, no one else can set you free. You're locked inside, and only you have got the key.